From the heart of the Space City to the heart of Gen Z, welcome to Next Gen Conversation. Not Dad's Talk Radio. Ethan talks to you about the issues and events that matter to our generation. This is the Next Gen Report with Ethan Buchanan.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Next Gen Report. Alrighty, what do we got going on? It's been a busy week. It's been a very busy week for me. I apologize if I haven't been as active as I normally am on ye old social medias. I'll be getting better. I've had a very busy week. Haven't had a lot of time to be online, but things are starting to slow down a little bit. So follow me on X at _Ethan Buchanan if you're not already. Buchanan, by the way. That's the best way to stay up to date and in touch with the show, with everything I do. It's all there on X, and then from there, if you want to branch out to the YouTube, to the Instagram, to the what have you, the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, whatever your favorite platform is, it's all right there on X. Check me out there. All right, let's start by talking about the elections. The runoffs are starting Monday, this coming Monday, actually, so it creeped up on us real quick. If you're in the GOP, I think this runoff cycle is very interesting, and we'll get into it. Obviously, the biggest, by far, race in this cycle, I think, is the Texas Senate race, and right now it's the Texas Senate GOP race. That runoff, which John Cornyn is absolutely getting spanked in, by the way. We're gonna start with this, actually. Let me show you where we're at in terms of the polling. This is from Real Clear Politics. This isn't, so far as I'm aware, biased towards any particular person. It's an average of a bunch of different polls that have all been done by various people. University of Houston has Paxton up by 3 points. A coefficient poll has Cornyn up by 1 point. That's it. That's his only lead, and it's by 1 point. We've got a Qantas Insights poll that's got Paxton up by 8, and then another poll that's got Paxton up by 3. So he's up by an average of about 3.2 points. Ken Paxton is over John Cornyn. And I'll remind you, John Cornyn is the incumbent. That is not good for John Cornyn, I should say. If you're in the John Cornyn camp, you should be nervous. You should be. And we'll dig into that in a minute, but I don't want to let some of our other really important statewide races go untalked about, because all of these are important. Chip Roy versus Mays Middleton in the Attorney General race. It's going to be a big deal. Listen, I know Mays Middleton. I like Mays Middleton. He's a nice guy. I'll probably vote for him. This is not an endorsement. I'm not saying you should vote for him. I'm just saying I know Mays. I like Mays' record in the Texas Senate. He's done a really good job. If you look at any of the big priority Republican bills that have been pushed through, Mays Middleton's name is on almost all of them. Almost all of them, if not all of them. So that's probably where I'm going. Chip Roy's got a decent record in the U.S. House, too. I know he said a lot of things several years ago that make a lot of kind of hardcore Trump loyalists upset. I don't like any of those things either. I think he's put his foot in his mouth a good handful of times, but he's got a decent record. He's one of the big pushers of the SAVE Act. He's the guy that really got that ball rolling, so he deserves credit for that. I think he would be fine as Attorney General. I think Mays Middleton would do a really good job. I think Chip Roy would probably be fine. Vote your conscience on that. I don't care. Let's see. Railroad Commissioner. I really don't know a whole lot about this race. Jim Wright is the incumbent in the GOP. He's fine, I guess. I don't know. Beau French has made a lot of people angry because he's a very aggressive person. He's very active. He got his kind of claim to fame was being the head of the Tarrant County GOP, and he built himself up a profile there, and he did it by attacking people, which is fine. There's a need for that sometimes. I think we might be in a position where we need that. I think at this point, what so much of the GOP primaries come down to is what kind of GOP do you want to have? Do you want a GOP that's just going to kind of do the bare minimum to hold the line? Or do you want a GOP that's going to go on the offensive? Now, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you over which one of those is better, but I do think we are at a point right now in our modern American politics and even state politics where you have to go on the offensive. That's the situation. Sometimes it's better to just kind of hold your ground and lock in Other times you need to go on the offensive. It is my opinion that right now, the political climate, both in the state of Texas and nationally, is such that we need a GOP that will go on the offensive. That's kind of why I like Beau French. He's a very much go on the offensive guy. Now, that makes people upset. That makes people nervous. That makes people a little bit antsy. Do we want to, rock the boat? Do we want to stir the pot at all here? I think we need that. Beau French will do that. That's why I like him. I'll probably vote for him. Again, these are not endorsements. I'm just telling you what I'm going to do. Same thing with John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. I have a lot of beef actually with John Cornyn, but Ken Paxton really is a go on the offensive guy. Look at his record as the Texas Attorney General. He is a go on the offensive guy. So that's why I like him so much. Mays Middleton too. He takes on culture war issues that people don't necessarily want to talk about all the time. The bathroom bill here in Texas that barred men from women's restrooms in state and government-owned facilities. That was him primarily leading the charge on that in the Senate. So, and I think that's really the big statewide races. If you're in various localities, get in touch with folks there, dig into those. Obviously, there's a lot of local Harris County races here in Houston, and then some various district races. But statewide, those are the big ones. That's what you need to be most locked in on. We're going to talk about that quite a bit more. I've still got a whole lot more, especially with John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. The issue that we're running into is voting starts on Monday, and we still don't have an endorsement from President Trump. And he said a couple of times that he's going to make an endorsement, but he hasn't done it yet. A lot of people are wondering why that hasn't happened, if it's still going to happen. I don't know. I would prefer it, honestly. I wouldn't even want Donald Trump to endorse Ken Paxton at this point. I want Trump to just stay out of this. Let us handle this internally. The Texas GOP will decide who we want to represent us. And then the state of Texas, after the GOP primaries are over, I would rather President Trump don't endorse. But we'll get into all of that. He has said he will. He might still at some point. That's going to be coming up in the next segment. Real quick, before we take a quick ad break, once again, follow me on X at _Ethan Buchanan, BUCHANAN. There's a lot of visual elements in this show. You can see them all after the live broadcast on my X page. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more on the Texas elections right after these ads. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Next Gen Report. My folks in San Antonio and Dallas, if you're listening to me right now, it is a pleasure to be with you. I don't love your cities as much as mine, but I love you. All right, real quick, before we do anything else, before we go any farther, I want to ask you to support the sponsor of this show, Deus Volt Lapel Pins. That's deusvoltlapelpins.com. Some fun stuff going on. They just put out the first, I think, ever car detail that they've done, or decal, I should say. This is super cool. It's an outline of Texas with the Jerusalem cross in the middle of it. It looks awesome. I'm about to order some as soon as I get done rolling on this show because I want one so bad. I love having decals on my car. This decal looks awesome. And of course, their signature item, the Deus Volt lapel pins, they've got a ton of designs. They're all fantastic. Most of them are $6. A few are a little bit extra, maybe $1 or so extra if they're a little bit more intricate or fancy. These pins are fantastic, guys. You honestly cannot get a better accent piece for any outfit. If you ever wear a suit jacket ever, you should have a lapel pin on it. You should have one of these lapel pins on it. Go to deusvoltlapelpins.com. Check out their designs. See if they have 1 or 2 or 3 that you like. Use promo code NEXTPIN2026. Go get your decal. If you're anywhere in Texas, this car decal, I think, is just frankly awesome. Show your state pride. Show your Christian faith. They're great. They're great. They really are. All right. Now, digging into the runoff, I want to talk specifically about the Paxton-Cornyn race, obviously, because that is I think, the biggest race of the entire 2026 cycle. The main question right now is President Trump actually going to make an endorsement in this race? He had said several months ago, I think right after the first round of primaries, that he was going to make an endorsement, but he was just kind of waiting to see. And then nothing really happened with that. We were just kind of sitting on it, waiting. He has come back now, and just a couple of weeks ago, he said again, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to make an endorsement here pretty soon. Take a listen to this.
One or two more. I want to look at the surface because I like the surface better than I like.
You endorse either John Cornyn or Ken Paxton?
I'll make a decision. Yeah, I'll make a decision.
When will you make your decision?
Maybe relatively soon.
Would you, Mr. President,
I like them
on
both.
oil exports?
Maybe relatively soon. I like them both. Now, you recall, that's what he said right after the primaries. So he hasn't changed his tune. I'll make an endorsement maybe relatively soon. That's been his consistent message. At this point, you kind of have to wonder, what is he waiting for, right? I mean, why not just come out and make an endorsement? Is it being used as leverage for something? Has he just not made up his mind? Is he hearing, conflicting messages from his political advisors? That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking he's got someone in his ear who's kind of more establishment GOP that's saying, Mr. President, you should endorse John Cornyn. And then he's looking at what kind of the grassroots folks on X, on Truth Social, wherever, he's looking at what they're saying, and they're saying, no, don't make an endorsement. And if you do, it better not be John Cornyn. And so he's kind of conflicted there. That's my prediction. Although he could still be wanting to just hold this in his back pocket for leverage. This was the rumor before. Breitbart had reported this. Trump to Thune and Cornyn. I want Save America Act on my desk before endorsement in Texas race. That would make sense. That's a pretty big piece of leverage if John Cornyn's desperately trying to hold on to his job. That, I could see that. That makes sense. Now, the issue we run into there is the SAVE Act is basically already dead. John Thune has all but surrendered on the SAVE Act, so what are you waiting for? I mean, it's not going to get passed, at least not this session. So then what? Maybe he's hoping they change his mind. I just don't know. John Cornyn, for his part, is very desperate for this endorsement. I showed you the poll numbers. I'll show them to you again. He's going to lose this race. His only hope in a billion years is Donald Trump gives him an endorsement, maybe, just maybe, that will help him survive. I don't think that's the case. I just don't. I'm sorry. I think even with a Trump endorsement, Cornyn does not come back from these numbers, especially this late in the game. I remind you, the voting starts on Monday, this coming Monday. So, I mean, maybe Trump will get the endorsement out in time and that'll sway enough early voters to maybe save John Cornyn. But he would have to do it before the polls open on Monday, which is at 7 a.m. So anything after that, Cornyn's going to lose votes, and that endorsement's not going to be able to get those votes back. And again, I still don't think that they would have really that big of an impact at all. I think if most Texas voters who really love Trump saw that he endorsed John Cornyn, they're just going to say, I think he's wrong, and vote for Ken Paxton. Nevertheless, Cornyn still really wants it. This is his latest attempt at earning that endorsement. He couldn't push the SAVE Act through, but he's going to rename a highway. This is from the Houston Chronicle. John Cornyn files a bill to rename Highway 287 in honor of Donald Trump. U.S. Senator John Cornyn on Tuesday proposed designating Highway 287 as Interstate 47 in honor of President Trump. Cornyn, who is in a tight primary battle against Attorney General Ken Paxton, explained the move in a social media post as an attempt to honor the most effective and influential president of our lifetime. Both he and Paxton have been vying for Trump's endorsement in the lead up to their May 26 runoff. Now, the best way, in my opinion, to honor the most effective and influential president in our lifetime would be to be effective and influential. But John Cornyn hasn't done that. And even in his attempt to earn this endorsement, he's not doing that. I mean, he's just virtue signaling. That's what this is. I mean, it's cool. I would love to have a Donald Trump highway. I think that's fun. Why not? I like Donald Trump. Honor him. I think he's been a great president. Let's give him a shout out on a highway. Why not? It's still virtue signaling. That's what this is. And that's Cornyn's desperate attempt to get the endorsement, is virtue signal. And this kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago in the first segment. The choice here is, what type of Republican Party do you want? Do you want a go on the offensive, aggressive Republican Party here in the state of Texas and nationally? Or do you want the Republican Party that just kind of sits there and holds their own and just watches as things happen? I think this is a prime example of the fact that John Cornyn is that. That's what I think. That's how I feel about it. Because, again, John Cornyn is in a leadership position in the Senate. What he says matters in the Senate. He's been there a while. He has a lot of pull. I have a hard time believing that John Cornyn, putting in all his effort, wouldn't be able to get the SAVE Act passed if he truly put in all his effort. But we've got nothing. We've got nothing. But John Cornyn wants to rename a highway. Why not? All right, real quick, before we jump off of this topic and head into Virginia, we're going to have Jesse Hughes with us in the next segment. He is an activist up there, a good, strong conservative, and we're going to talk to him about what's going on in Virginia. Before we do that, we have some fun personal news from James Tallarico on the Democrat side of the aisle. He has got a girlfriend, allegedly. Here he is announcing that.
The biggest question, not even close, the most popular question that we got asked is, are you single? Are you single? So you have a girlfriend.
I do.
Of many years.
I do. And she is my rock. She is my best friend. I don't know if I could have gotten through the last 6 months of this crazy race if she hadn't been by my side.
You are lying. You do not have a girlfriend. I don't believe you. You've been in the public eye for years, and you've supposedly been dating this woman for years, and we just start hearing about her now after all of the allegations that he might be a homosexual? Get out of here. You do not have a girlfriend, James Tallarico. All right, we'll be right back. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, the redistricting war continues. And despite the best efforts of some rhinos in certain red states to kind of hamper it, all things considered, it is going fairly well. We got some news out of Virginia. Those maps are now, I think, officially dead thanks to the U.S. Supreme Court, who put the final nail in that coffin. But this has gotten very, very complicated. Right. It's very weird the way they've gone about doing their redistricting. It's very strange. And I don't know that much about Virginia law. So I brought in somebody who does. I'm joined by Jesse Hughes, a fantastic podcast host, a conservative activist based out of Virginia. Jesse, thank you for joining me this evening. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I cannot complain. So I guess let's start with this. Texas redrew our maps, and it was fine. Everything went according to plan. We redrew the maps. We got sued. The maps got upheld. Virginia redrew their maps, got sued, and everything fell apart. Why?
Well, the reason is because the Democrats who control the General Assembly in Virginia completely disregarded the Virginia Constitution while they were going about this process. So the Virginia Constitution lays out the procedure for amending the Constitution. And the way that they did this redistricting process was through a constitutional amendment, because Virginians had voted to have an independent commission do it in 2020. but Democrats didn't like what was going on in Texas, so they voted a constitutional amendment in to redraw the maps. Now, the way they did it was that you're supposed to have a session where you vote upon the amendment, and then there has to be an intervening election of the House of Delegates. And then after that election, you're supposed to vote again. What the Virginia Democrats did is that in the middle of the election last year, during the race for governor and for the House of Delegates, in the middle of that election, on October 31st, just a few days before Election Day, they brought this amendment to the floor in the middle of what was supposed to be a special session for the budget. That's a whole different issue. But they brought this amendment to the floor and voted on it after millions of Virginians had already voted. They passed it. The election is held and finished. And then this past winter, they voted on it again and passed it and put it out for Virginians. Now, there are some other issues with this whole process that went on, but the main issue that the Supreme Court focused in on was that issue of the intervening election. Now, Jay Jones, the Attorney General, tried to argue that the early voting period was actually not part of the election, but was just an election process leading up to the election. The Supreme Court didn't buy it, and they struck down this effort on those constitutional procedural grounds.
So this nonsense that we've heard so much from the left in the aftermath of this, and if you're on Twitter at all, you've probably seen this already. It's an example of the bias of the Supreme Court, because the Republicans are allowed to redistrict, but the Democrats are not. It seems to me the reality of what happened is Republicans were allowed to redistrict because they did it properly, and the Democrats were not allowed to redistrict because they did not do it properly. Is that about the size and shape of it?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. In Republican states, they've been following the law. They've been following the process set out by their laws and their state constitutions. Here in Virginia, they just tried to ram it through, disregard the constitution of the state, and it backfired in their face.
Yeah. And it's important to remind people that, this process is different state by state. How this works, right, who gets to redistrict and when, does vary state by state, because we are, at least according to the Constitution, a collection of independent states. And this power was not delegated to the federal government by the U.S. Constitution. So we get to do it as we see fit as members of individual states. So you can sit there and say all you want, oh, this isn't fair because the Republicans get to do it easier in certain states and we have to go through so much work or what have you. Maybe it isn't fair, but that's how we've decided in Texas we want this process to be done. And somebody else has decided in another state they want a more difficult process. Once you set those rules, you have to play by them, but they don't have to be the same state to state.
No, absolutely not. And if you don't like it, then vote for somebody that's going to change the rules. If you don't like how your state lays this out, then vote for somebody that's going to change that. But if it's in place, if that's what's the process that's in place, then you have to abide by that. And if you don't, then the courts are going to come in after and they're going to strike it down. It's just common sense. Anybody with a pair of eyeballs and working brain cells could have saw this coming.
Well, then it makes sense that the Democrats didn't. But real quick, I want to get your reaction to your governor's tweet about this. The Supreme Court of the United States has now joined the Supreme Court of Virginia in choosing to nullify an election and the votes of more than 3 million Virginians. These Virginians made their voices heard, casting their ballots in good faith to push back against the president who said he's entitled to more seats in Congress before voters got to the polls. Now, I think this is a prime example of how the Democrats view our system of government. You hear all the time from Democrats about democracy, democracy, democracy. And I think she's correct in saying things like this is a threat to democracy. What she's missing is the fact that the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia is not a democracy and never was. If this bare majority of Virginians had been allowed to push these maps down on everybody else, That would be democracy. We're not in a democracy. We're in a constitutional republic, and that's what she's missing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that she's missing, and that I think a lot of people don't understand, is that the Supreme Court didn't just like come out and say, yeah, we agree with Virginia. We're not gonna uphold these maps. The Supreme Court kind of declined to comment. And the reason why is because there wasn't a federal question involved. If you're wanting to get before the United States Supreme Court, there has to be some sort of federal question in your claim. There wasn't one here. It was completely a state issue, and the Supreme Court's not going to step into that. But no, you're completely right. We're not a democracy. People are trying to turn us into one, and that shouldn't be tolerated. But we've always been a constitutional republic. That is the cornerstone of our system of law and order. And if Democrats don't like that, well, they can try to change it, but those of us who recognize that that is where our freedoms come from and how our system has been run for 2.5 centuries now, we're not just going to roll over and let them change that easily. Like, we are going to fight to preserve our nation and our heritage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, I think it's important for people to really understand. It's one of those things that you don't think about. It's like the fish doesn't see the water, right? And pick any political issue. If you're in the minority, you lose that political issue in a democratic situation. A pure democracy, you will lose if you're in a bare majority. It's something that Democrats, you would think they would be all for defending the constitutional republic ideologies, but you see cases like this where the pure raw democracy loses to the institutions that we've set up in a Republican fashion, and they're immediately trying to destroy all of those institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's because when it works for them, they'll defend it to the death. Like right now, when Democrats are in the minority in the House of Representatives and the Senate at the federal level, all of a sudden you hear talk of our constitutional principles and our system of law and order and our rules and our norms and our traditions. But the moment they gain power and gain a majority like they have here in Virginia, all of a sudden that changes. All of a sudden it's, we have the power. We're a majority. You have to abide by what we say. They're completely hypocritical. When it serves their interest, then they'll talk about the Constitution. But when they're the ones in power, that's when you see, oh, it's our democracy, because they realize that they have the majority, unfortunately, and so they want to be able to do whatever they want with it. But our founding fathers were smart and set up a system that protects the rights of the minority as well as those of the majority. And since that system is what's in place and it's hampering Democrats from doing what they want to do, you're seeing them freak out and call it threats to democracy, because that's what they want, to trample the minorities' rights.
Fantastic. Well, Jesse, in these last 15 seconds, tell us real quick, where can we find your work and where can we watch and listen to your show?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Jesse Hughes NC, or just go to YouTube and search for the Jesse Hughes Show. That's where you'll find me.
All right, fantastic. Jesse, thank you very much for coming in and helping me break down this stuff. Virginia, I got to say, I love you guys, but y'all do stuff weird up there. If you're listening right now, go check out Jesse. He does a lot of really good work. He's got a fantastic show, a fellow Deus Vult lapel pin brother. Thank you very much once again, Jesse.
Thank you.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I want to say a quick thank you to Jesse Hughes for coming and help us explain what's going on in Virginia. The way they do their constitutional amendments is just so strange to me. It's just weird that they do it that way. So thank you, Jesse, for coming and helping to explain that. Let's talk a little bit about Trump's trip to China before we call it a weekend. I wish we didn't have any relationship with China at all. I don't like the nation of China. I think it's a very evil nation. Now, I want to preface that by saying I don't think the people of China are evil. I don't necessarily think the culture in China is evil. I think the people for the most part, in China are great. I think the culture in China is very cool. It's very old. It's very historical. There's a lot of value in that. However, China is a nation that is ran by a very atheistic, communistic government. It's very top down. It's very dictatorial. I think those things are in and of themselves evil. I find atheism to be evil. It is a product of evil. So is communism. So is, I think, for the most part, dictatorship, especially one that's tyrannical. Because you could technically have a dictatorship that's not overly tyrannical. You could have a benevolent monarchy that actually guarantees people its rights and whatnot. But anyway, I think, to make a long story short, China is an evil nation, specifically the government, but whatever. I would prefer for us to just cut China off entirely. I don't want us to do any business with China. I don't want to buy Chinese products. I would rather not sell them our stuff. I don't like that country. Until something changes, I think we should just not do business with them. But we do business with them. So we should make sure that business is in our interests. All right? We should be benefiting from that. If not mutually, then us exclusively. So this trade mission to China was important. And that is what it was. It was primarily a trade mission. They talked about a bunch of other stuff. They smiled. They took pictures, whatever. The main issue here was trade. And we know that because who did Trump bring with him? He brought Elon Musk and Tim Cook and, business leaders. Now, it seems like the trade aspect went relatively well. Here is our ambassador, our trade ambassador, Jameson Greer. And this is from a couple of days ago. This is when he was actually in China. And he's like, yeah, I think we're making good deals. I think we're going to have a lot of good stuff on the agriculture front. Here he is saying that.
So remember, we're in a situation where we're trying to rebalance our trade with China. We've had a lot of success in that. Our trade deficit with China went down by a third last year, in 1 year. And so we're trying to manage the trade around the kinds of things we want to be selling to China, whether it's Boeings or soybeans or other ag or energy or medical devices. And so you can see us bit by bit building up this strategy. Coming out of this week, you heard the president today talk about the Boeings and hundreds of Boeings being purchased by China. We already have a soybean deal with them from our prior meetings of 25 million metric tons a year over the next 3 years. And we expect to also see an agreement for double-digit billion purchases of ags over the next 3 years per year coming out of this visit. And that's more general. That's aggregate. That's not just soybeans. That's everything else. So
okay, so that's great. Obviously, for our farmers, if they're able to sell their products, that's good. They'll get more money, more demand. Again, it's with China, so take that for what it's worth. I really do not like the nation of China. The biggest, I think, headlines have been about military stuff. That's where all the focus has been. Obviously, that is important. China is a big military power. At least they look like they are. Specifically when it comes to Iran, there has been a lot of discussion. A lot of people maybe don't know why, so I want to break that down. Our kind of off-ramp with Iran is they come to the understanding of the fact that they've lost. That's where we're at right now. They've lost, they just don't know it yet. They haven't recognized that. One of the reasons they haven't recognized that is because China is propping them up. As long as they can keep selling oil to China, they can keep making enough money for that regime to stay afloat. They just need to have enough money to pay off the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they can keep suppressing the people long enough for the regime to stay in power. And China is still buying oil from them, despite our efforts to stop it. And so getting China's backing in knocking out the Iranian regime is going to be very important. Because, again, they can prop them up probably indefinitely. Hypothetically indefinitely, they could continue to prop up Iran. So just to kind of set the stage for you, here's where we're at right now. As freight traffic between China and Iran increases, this is via Fox News, along an overland route beyond the reach of American warships, The dynamic is exposing a core limitation in U.S. strategy. Maritime pressure is powerful, but it doesn't fully extend across Eurasia. According to Bloomberg, cargo trains running from central China to Iran have jumped from roughly 1 per week before the blockade to 1 every 3 or 4 days, highlighting a growing alternative channel as Tehran looks to blunt maritime pressure. So essentially, Tehran can't move their oil via the Strait of Hormuz because we've blockaded it, but they can still sell it to China via land. And as long as they can do that, they can keep paying the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. For whatever reason, China has not been overly eager to really get involved here, which is, I think, makes sense for them. They don't want to necessarily piss us off. They don't want to necessarily piss Iran off, because as long as they can keep buying oil from Iran, they can get it for really good and cheap. Iran sells oil to China not at market price, but significantly, as I understand it, below market price, which means they're getting their energy at a discount. We would need to somehow incentivize China to give up on that and instead buy their oil from us or buy it at market value. I don't know how we do that. I don't know how we go about convincing China that, hey, you shouldn't buy your oil at a discount and therefore come into the global market at a significant advantage. You should come into the global market at a level playing field. That's going to be very tough. And so far as I can tell, that's pretty much the only way that we actually end this war. Because it is at that point that the Iranian regime will start to realize, okay, we have nothing left. We really do truly have no cards, and we recognize that. Right now, they've essentially put all of their hope in China will keep us afloat. So we have to convince China to stop doing that. Now, maybe we could do that with trade pressure. I don't know. This is kind of the catch-22 that the United States has put itself in. We have reached a point of heavy market reliance on cheap Chinese products. If we said no more products from China, it would cripple China. But it would also piss off American voters, and nobody really has the appetite to do that because things would, at least for a time, get significantly more expensive. And then the market would adjust, we'd work our way around it, it would be fine in a couple of months or a couple of years, but there would be an initial market shock, and the American people just don't have the appetite for that. So I really don't know what the Trump administration does here. Truly, I don't. And listen, I love Trump. I think he does a lot of really good stuff, but the catch-22 here is a significant one. What do we do? It's something that we're going to have to think about for the next several months. And smarter people that I think are going to be in those rooms having conversations about it. I'm sure we can find some leverage somewhere. Maybe that was part of what this meeting was, trying to sniff out where the weak points might be, where we might be able to put some extra pressure on them. I hope for the best. I will say this, the best needs to come very soon because gas is expensive and it is because of this war. And if we don't solve that issue soon, the American people are not going to be happy and it's going to hurt the Republicans in the election. Hopefully not too much, but I think it will hurt a little bit. We'll see what happens. I'm Ethan Buchanan. This has been the Next Gen Report. Thank you very much for listening.